Here we have the Ukrainian demographic structure. After independence in 1992, over a third of the population either left or died. Some of the lowest birth rates we've ever seen. Another third of the population since the war has fled as refugees, mostly women and children. So this is pre-war data. We're very close to the point in Ukraine where they will not have the population density that is required to maintain industrial level infrastructure. So whether it is food or steel or coal or just stuff transiting, Ukraine is not going to survive the next 30 years, even if they win the war.
Even if Ukraine wins the war against Russia, its future remains in danger. That's the latest prediction from geopolitical expert and strategist Peter Zyyhan. Ukraine's population has been declining rapidly since gaining independence in 1992. Over a third of its population has either died or emigrated, compounded by one of the lowest birth rates in the world. The war has further exacerbated this issue, with another third of the population fleeing as refugees, predominantly women and children. This leaves Ukraine with a rapidly shrinking and aging population, raising concerns about whether it will have the population density needed to maintain its industrial infrastructure. With fewer people working in key industries like food production, steel, and coal, Ukraine's ability to sustain its economy is in jeopardy. Even if the war ends in Ukraine's favor, the long-term demographic decline could prevent the country from recovering economically, leading to a situation where it may struggle to survive over the next 30 years. In today's in-depth analysis, geopolitical expert Peter Zyyhan reveals why neither Ukraine nor Russia will be better off, even if either wins the war. Make sure to stick around to the end of the video, where we will break down Peter's analysis and provide you with key takeaways on the long-term implications for both countries. Also, guys, only a small percentage of my viewers are subscribed. If you enjoy economics, geopolitics, and history, consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind. Now, let's jump in with this analysis with Peter Zyyhan.
There's another problem in that space. This is, hang on, my hair's falling apart here. This is the Russian permafrost. It's a geological phenomenon. You go 10 to 30 feet down and you hit a layer where it never melts. But the top chunk melts in the summer and turns into a bog. It is the most difficult environment in the world for mineral extraction. So the Russians have the most expensive upfront cost to bring stuff online. You basically have to wait for it to freeze solid. You run a berm out to your production site. You run a rail line or a pipe or a road along that berm, and then you have a pad that you drill from when it's frozen, because you can't drill through mud. It's a very dynamic landscape, because if an aquifer cracks open, everything just kind of slides and follows the aquifer. Or maybe it drains down, in which case you just get a sinkhole pit that opens. Or maybe there's no aquifer and you just get a warm summer, and the vegetation that's been frozen for eons starts to thaw, starts to decompose. Decomposing vegetable matter gives off methane, and the whole land buckles. Which means that the Russians have the highest maintenance costs for any mineral production in the world. Here's the problem. Russian population structure. Now, about the time that people who were 15 were getting born, 2004, 2005, that's when the Russians stopped collecting data and just started making it up. So you've got that big gouge in the 20-somethings, post-Cold War birth rate collapse, and then you have fabricated data. There probably are only half as many children as this data would suggest. The Russian educational system collapsed back in 1985. So we had a collapse in the birth rate, a collapse of the educational system, which means that the youngest people in Russia who actually have technical skills at scale, they turned 62 this year. The year before the Russians started fabricating data, the life expectancy for the average Russian male was 67. They already had the worst skilled labor pool relative to their population and their needs in the world, and they're very close from simply losing all of it. The maintenance on the Russian systems, the development on the Russian systems, hasn't been done by the Russians for the most part. It's been done by BP or ExxonMobil, and especially the Dutch and the Germans, and all that went to zero when the war started. So whether it's sanctions, war damage, or simple lack of maintenance, we need to prepare for a world where everything that the world has become reliant upon from the Russians, palladium, platinum, oil, gas, even timber, just doesn't come anymore. There's another angle to it that's a little uglier. Now, this guy, you can see where the ethnic Russian territories are in the top left. You got Turkic minorities off to the east and the south. The problem is this is not an ethnic map, it's a population change map. The green zones are where population growth is happening roughly on par with Florida and has for 4 decades. And the red zones are population losses roughly equivalent to Detroit and has been for 4 decades. Almost all the raw materials are produced in the green zones that are not controlled by ethnic Russians, where they're experiencing population growth, but they're shipped through and processed in the red zones, where the last bits of the skilled labor pool are, that is in terminal decline. So you can add demographics to the reasons that we need to kiss the Russian stuff goodbye as well. Not to mention that this is going to be a very politically unstable region in the not too distant future because of the mismatch. One of the many reasons that the Russians feel that the Ukraine war is necessary is if they can get to kind of that outer crustal defense that they used to have in the Soviet period, then they can focus their forces internally to police this demographic flip. They're fighting for time. If they can pull this off, they probably buy themselves another 50 years. If they fail, they're gone within 20.
While Ukraine faces its problems, Russia is not immune to its demographic and economic crises. Many parts of Russia are covered in permafrost, a thick layer of soil that remains frozen year-round. This makes mineral extraction in these areas extremely difficult and costly. The infrastructure needed to extract resources, like oil and gas, requires building on frozen ground, which can be unpredictable and unstable. This not only drives up the costs, but also makes the maintenance of these operations incredibly challenging. Russia's population structure is another problem. The country has seen a dramatic collapse in birth rates and educational standards since the 1980s. Today, Russia's youngest skilled workers are approaching retirement age, and the country's educational system has not produced enough new talent to replace them. The data collected on Russia's population has been unreliable since the early 2000s, with significant underreporting of children and young adults. Without the necessary skilled labor and dwindling population numbers, Russia's ability to maintain its industrial and economic infrastructure is seriously jeopardized. The situation is so dire that experts predict that Russia might not be able to sustain its economy for more than 20 years, especially if the war with Ukraine continues to strain its resources. What do you think will become of these two nations? Let us know in the comments. Now let's get back to Peter Zyyhan as he discusses this further.
All right, let me take a big dump on green tech. We talked about this a little bit last time I saw you guys. I think I even showed you this graphic. I mean, oversimplifying here, but thermal power, internal combustion engines, not all that complicated. You light a match, you start a fire, you capture the heat in some way. Can't do that with an EV system, can't do that with green tech. The process of producing the energy, transmitting the energy, storing the energy requires an order of magnitude more materials and different materials. We're looking here at an EV versus an ICE vehicle. You can just see at a glance. And then here's the same kind of idea, but for generation, with solar and wind at the top, conventional thermal at the bottom. We need 3 times as much copper by 2030. We need 20 times as much lithium. We need 10 times as much nickel. There isn't enough on the planet to pull that off. And the Russians are a top 3 producer of these things. So it can't happen. It's not physically possible with today's technology for the world. There is one way it might be possible for us. This is where all the stuff comes from that is not what we would consider to be part of our friends and family network. If we use our military, which is done with the war on terror, which is recruited and rested and rearmed, and we go and conquer all of these places, and we run a Belgian imperial-style extraction empire, and bring all of it home, then we can do the green transition. but no one else. Now, this is not a recommendation. I'm just saying that the path we're on, this is the only way that it works. And even that would not be enough because you still have to turn it into processed material. Lithium ore is useless. You have to turn it into lithium metal. The red bars are the stuff where that processing happens in either China or Russia. And even that's not enough. You have to talk about finance. Here you're looking at the full cycle cost for a natural gas combined cycle plant. The blue is the construction, the siting, the building. The gray is the fuel, full life cycle. This is a model you're familiar with. This is what you all do. The idea is it's a subscription model. You pay as you go. That doesn't work for green tech. For green tech, it's almost all up front. This is wind. Capital costs have tripled. They will triple again. I think most of the plans that were put out there 4 years ago assumed that there would never be a 100 basis point increase in capital costs. We've now gone up by 500. We have another 500 to go. The market can't support this. The IRA will help maybe sand down some edges. But we're going to have to do something that in the United States we really don't like doing. We're going to have to choose what we want to focus on. The smart play would be to put solar panels where it's sunny, not in Massachusetts. Put wind turbines where it's windy, not in Florida. And wire the power to where we actually live. But we're not going to do that. That's the smart thing.
So now, let's analyze why this war is doing more harm than good. Currently, both Ukraine and Russia are facing severe demographic challenges that are threatening their future stability. For Ukraine, the population loss due to this ongoing war and emigration could lead to an inability to maintain its industrial base even if it wins the war. For Russia, the combination of a declining population, a struggling educational system, and the challenges of extracting resources from permafrost regions could lead to a catastrophic collapse of its economy. As these demographic and economic crises continue, the world might need to brace for a future in which resources like oil, gas, metals, and timber from these two countries become unavailable. This could lead to serious disruptions in global supply chains and increased geopolitical instability in various regions. With all of that being said, what do you think of these developments? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching and subscribe for more updates and analysis as we track the most important global issues.